Ever heard of a monk who moonlighted as, well, a pirate?
I mean, it's not exactly something you hear every day, is it?
Not exactly. But that's exactly what we're diving into today, the wild, unbelievable story of Eustace the monk.
A 13th century figure whose life reads like, honestly, something out of a movie.
More like a medieval soap opera,
Oh,
really.
absolutely. Full of drama, intrigue, and enough twists and turns to make your head spin.
So, to set the stage for this deep dive, what kind of sources are we dealing with here? Because I've heard it's not exactly straightforward.
Well, our main source is a medieval romance poem, which, as you can imagine, takes some liberties with the truth.
Romance poem, meaning it's not exactly a dry historical account.
Let's just say they were a bit more, shall we say, creative with the facts back then.
So we're talking historical fiction with a medieval twist. Sounds like it'll be a fun challenge to sift through.
Oh, absolutely. But that's part of what makes it so fascinating, trying to separate fact from fiction in a story this wild.
So where do we even begin with a character like Eustace? What do we actually know about his early life?
Well, what we think we know is that he was born around 1170 into a noble family in Boulogne, which is in northern France.
Okay, so not exactly born into poverty then.
No, definitely not. And he received training as both a knight and a seafarer.
Ah, see, those skills will definitely come in handy later, considering the whole pirate thing.
You can say that again, but then the poem throws us a bit of a curveball.
Okay, I'm sensing a but coming.
It claims that Eustace traveled all the way to Toledo, Spain, to study, get this, sorcery and necromancy.
Wait, hold on. Are we talking like Harry Potter level magic here?
Not quite Harry Potter, but definitely some medieval dark arts.
And they just casually mention this in a poem about his life.
Well, it's presented as fact, but whether or not he actually made this trip is up for debate.
So it could be a way of explaining his more cunning and ruthless tendencies later on.
Exactly. It adds a layer of mystery and intrigue to his character.
And speaking of intrigue, didn't he also supposedly cause some chaos in a tavern? Something about magic and lack of clothing.
Ah, yes, the tavern incident. Apparently, he tried to pay with foreign currency, and when they refused, he used magic to make everyone strip off their clothes.
Oh my gosh, that's incredible. A medieval tavern suddenly full of naked people. That's a scene I'd love to see.
It's a pretty hilarious image and probably exaggerated, but it paints a vivid picture of a young Eustace who was already a bit of a troublemaker.
So we've got this picture of a magically inclined, prank-loving noble, and then out of nowhere, he decides to become a monk,
It does seem like a bit of a drastic career change, doesn't it?
to say the least. What led to that decision?
Well, the poem doesn't go into much detail,
So
unfortunately.
we're left to speculate.
Pretty much. But we do know he joined the Benedictine order.
The Benedictines, known for their peace and tranquility, right?
That's the stereotype, but according to our poem, Eustace didn't quite fit
What do
in.
you mean? Was he like the rebel monk breaking all the rules?
Let's just say he didn't exactly embrace the quiet monastic life. The poem claims he used his supposed black magic to, well, disrupt the monastery.
Oh, no. What did he do? Summon demons during prayer time? Turn the holy water into wine?
Not quite that dramatic, but the poem suggests he caused all sorts of mischief. Imagine a monk using sorcery to mess with meal times and make everyone walk around barefoot during prayers.
Oh my goodness. He sounds like a medieval Loki, sowing chaos wherever he goes.
That's a great comparison. But all this begs the question, why did he even become a monk in the first place? And perhaps even more intriguing, why did he leave?
That is a good question. So what are the theories about his departure from the monastery?
Well, there are a couple of versions of the story. One suggests his father died and he wanted to claim his inheritance, which of course wouldn't exactly fly with the whole monk thing.
Makes sense. Worldly possessions and all that.
Exactly. But another version claims he left to avenge his father's killer.
Okay, so revenge plot. This is getting good.
Right. He demanded a judicial duel, basically a trial by combat.
Wow, so like a real-life Game of Thrones
Yeah.
situation.
Very much so. But unfortunately for Eustace, his champion lost the duel.
Ouch. Talk about adding fuel to the fire.
Exactly. Now, he's not only an ex-monk who may or may not have dabbled in dark magic, but also a man with a score to settle.
So we've got a monk, skilled in combat, maybe into magic, and now fueled by revenge. This is where things start to get really interesting, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. This is just the beginning of Eustace's wild ride, and trust me, it's about to get a whole lot more complicated from here.
Well, I can't wait to hear what happens next. This is already more exciting than any history book I've ever read.
Oh, just you wait. The best is yet to come. Eustace's story is about to take a turn that will plunge him headfirst into the political turmoil of the 13th century.
This sounds like it's going to be epic.
Oh, it is, believe me. And just to give you a taste of what's to come, Eustace won't just be caught in the crossfire. He's going to become a major player in the events that shape England and France.
A monk turned, potentially political mastermind. This is getting better by the minute.
You know, you might just be onto something there, but you'll have to wait for the next part of our deep dives to hear all about it. We're just getting started with the incredible, unbelievable story of Eustace the monk.
Okay, so we've got this vengeful ex-monk, Eustace, maybe a little bit of magic going on, and now he's stepping onto the scene in 13th century Europe. What happens next?
Well, he ends up in the service of this powerful figure, Count Renard de Damartin. The Count's right in the middle of this whole power struggle between England and France.
So things are getting even more complicated.
Oh, absolutely. You've got King John of England on one side, constantly battling with King Philip II of France over territories like Normandy.
It's like a real-life Game of Thrones, isn't it? Kings, counts, everyone fighting for power.
Exactly. And Eustace, well, he finds himself right in the middle of it all.
Of course he does. So what's his role in all of this? Is he just a pawn in their game?
Not exactly. He serves the Count for a while, but then they have a falling out.
Falling out. What happened? Did Eustace do something? Well, Eustace-y.
It's not entirely clear, but there might have been some accusations of, shall we say, financial disagreements.
Oh, so maybe Eustace was skimming a little off the top.
It's possible. Whatever the reason, Eustace, being Eustace, decides he's had enough and becomes, wait for it, an outlaw.
Seriously, from monk to outlaw, this guy can't seem to stick to anything conventional.
Nope. He hides out in the woods of Boulogne, using all his skills to harass and rob his former employer.
So like a medieval Robin Hood situation.
Okay.
Robbing from the rich, but maybe not giving to the poor.
Well, the poem definitely plays up those Robin Hood parallels, disguises, ambushes, even reversing his horse's shoes to throw off pursuers.
That's pretty clever, I have to admit. But this is more than just personal revenge, right? It sounds like he's disrupting the whole political landscape.
You're absolutely right. His actions, while fueled by revenge, also have these wider consequences.
So he's shaking things up for both the English and the French. He's a one-man chaos agent.
Exactly. But eventually, all this catches up to him. He flees to England and, get this, offers his services to King John himself.
Wait, seriously? The king who he was just messing with? That's bold.
Oh, it was a risky move, for sure. But King John, desperate for skilled commanders, actually accepts Eustace's offer.
Wow, that's unexpected. So what does he have Eustace do? Lead an army against the French?
Not exactly. He grants Eustace a privateer's license.
A privateer? What's that?
Oh, well, it's basically a fancy way of saying legalized pirate.
So Eustace the monk turned outlaw is now a pirate working for the English crown. Talk about a career change.
You said it. And he thrives in this role, too. King John gives him a fleet, and Eustace leads successful raids against French ships.
So he's a pretty skilled captain then.
Oh, yeah, he was known for his naval expertise. He even helped to retake Normandy for a time.
Wow. But I'm guessing this is where his pirate instincts start to take over, right? He can't resist a little bit of plunder.
You know Eustace. Even while working for the king, he can't help but engage in a little side hustle of piracy.
No way. What did he do? Steal from the king's own ships?
Well, he didn't go that far, but he started attacking ships belonging to the king's allies, amassing a personal fortune.
So he's playing both sides, even while working for the English crown. That's risky.
Very risky. And he doesn't exactly keep a low profile either.
What do you mean?
The poem says he built himself a lavish palace, allegedly after tearing down the one the king gave him.
Wow. Talk about a power move. It seems like he's always pushing the boundaries no matter who he's working for.
You got that right. But as you can imagine, all this disregard for the rules eventually leads to a breakdown in his relationship with King John.
Yeah, I can see that coming. The king probably wasn't too happy about his allies being plundered.
Not at all. The king is bombarded with complaints about Eustace's attacks, unpaid debts, and general disregard for the law.
So what does King John do? Throw him in prison?
Well, King John had a different strategy. He used something Eustace cared about to try to control him.
What do you mean?
Remember those hostages we mentioned earlier, the king's enemies?
Yeah.
Well, the poem claims that King John takes Eustace's family hostage to ensure his loyalty.
Whoa, that's brutal. Did Eustace just give in?
Not exactly. This actually leads to Eustace's most shocking move yet. He switches sides.
What? Seriously? Who does he side with this time?
He goes back to France and throws his support behind King Philip II and his son, Prince Louis.
Oh, wow. So from English privateer to French ally, this is getting more and more complicated.
You're telling me. And it's about to get even more dramatic. We're talking war, invasion, and maybe even a connection to the Magna Carta.
You're kidding. Eustace and the Magna Carta. Now I really can't wait to hear what happens next.
Yeah.
Okay, so last we left off, Eustace had pulled a total 180 and was now siding with the French. King Philip II, Prince Louis talk about a plot twist.
So, like, he can't resist being on the side that's about to cause the most chaos, you know?
Seems like it. So what happens next? Do the French just welcome him back with open arms after all the trouble he caused them?
Well, they definitely need his naval expertise, that's for sure. They're in the middle of this whole plan to invade England. And who better to lead the charge from the sea than a former pirate, right?
Makes sense, I guess. So what's Eustace's role in this invasion? Is he just transporting troops or is he leading the attack?
Oh, he's right in the thick of it, believe me. He's transporting troops, weapons, supplies, basically everything the French need to conquer England.
Wow, so he's gone from disrupting a monastery to potentially deciding the fate of an entire nation. Talk about a glow up.
And it's not just any invasion either. This is happening right in the middle of the First Barons' War.
Wait, back up a sec. First Barons' War, I'm not sure I'm familiar with that one.
Basically, it's a massive rebellion against King John, led by English nobles who are fed up with his, well, let's just say his less than ideal leadership skills.
So England is in the middle of a civil war, and the French are taking advantage of the situation to launch an invasion. Talk about a recipe for disaster.
Oh, it's absolute chaos, and Eustace is right at the heart of it all.
This is getting way more complicated than I thought. So how does this invasion actually play out? Do the French manage to conquer England?
Well, it's not exactly a smooth sailing victory for them. Prince Louis lands in England with Eustace's support, and they manage to gain some ground, even capture London for a while.
No way. So for a moment, it seems like England might actually have a French king.
It was definitely a possibility, but things don't quite go according to plan for Prince Louis. He makes a few strategic blunders, alienates some of his English supporters, the classic mistakes of an overconfident conqueror.
So the English resistance starts to push back.
Exactly. They rally around the young Henry III, King John's son, and start to turn the tide.
Okay, so England is fighting back. The French invasion is stalling. Where's Eustace in all of this? Is he still leading the naval charge for the French?
Absolutely. In fact, he's about to play a crucial role in what becomes a pivotal battle in this whole conflict.
Okay, lay it on me. What battle are we talking about?
The Battle of Sandwich. It takes place in 1217, and it's a clash that will decide Eustace's fate and have major repercussions for both England and France.
Sandwich. Like the food. Did they really have a whole battle named after a sandwich?
No, it's named after the town of Sandwich on the English coast. But it's a pretty funny coincidence, isn't it?
It really is. So what happens at this Battle of Sandwich? Is it like one of those epic sea battles we see in movies with cannons and explosions and all that?
Well, naval warfare was a little different back then. Ships were mostly used for transport, so battles were less about long-range attacks and more about getting close enough to board the enemy ship.
Oh, so more like hand-to-hand combat on rocking ships. Sounds intense.
It was. And at the Battle of Sandwich, the English had this, well, interesting tactic up their sleeve.
Okay, I'm all ears. What did they do?
They used powdered lime. Imagine getting a face full of that stuff. It's incredibly caustic, burns like crazy, and can temporarily blind you.
Wow, that's brutal. But effective, I guess.
Definitely effective. It caught the French completely off guard, and the English took full advantage, focusing their attack on Eustace's flagship.
Why target him specifically? Was he just unlucky or was there a reason?
Well, his ship was carrying vital supplies for the French forces, so it was a strategic target. Plus, he was a known pirate and had made a lot of enemies on the English side. They were probably pretty eager to get their revenge.
So what happens? Does Eustace manage to fight his way out or does he go down with his ship?
It's not a happy ending for Eustace, I'm afraid. The English, fueled by a mix of patriotism and revenge, overpower his crew and capture him.
Oh no. What do they do to him? Imprison him. Ransom him back to the French.
Nope, they didn't take any chances. He was beheaded right there on the deck of his ship.
Wow, that's a dramatic end to a dramatic life. From monk to outlaw to pirate to admiral, and finally, well, beheaded on a ship. It's hard to believe this is a true story.
I know, right? But it just goes to show sometimes real life is even more unbelievable than anything we could make up.
So, looking back on Eustace's life, was he a hero, a villain, or something in between?
It's hard to say, really. He was incredibly skilled, resourceful, and ambitious, but he was also ruthless, opportunistic, and constantly shifting allegiances. He was a product of his time, a chaotic time where survival often meant playing by your own rules.
So a complex character who defied easy labels.
Yeah.
A bit of a medieval antihero.
Exactly. And his story is a reminder that history isn't just about dates and battles and kings and queens. It's about the individuals who lived through those times, the choices they made, and the unexpected ways they shaped the course of events.
Well, that's a pretty fitting end to our deep dive into the incredible and sometimes unbelievable life of Eustace the monk. From disrupting monasteries to possibly influencing the Magna Carta to ultimately playing a key role in the struggle for the English throne, his story has been a wild ride.
It really has. And it just goes to show even the most seemingly insignificant figures can end up having a surprisingly big impact on history.
And sometimes those figures are monks, turned outlaws, turned pirates, turned admirals, who end up beheaded on a ship after a battle involving powdered lime.
Only in the Middle Ages, right?
It seems so. Well, if you enjoyed this deep dive into the murky waters of history, make sure to subscribe to The Deep Dive for more fascinating stories from the past. We'll be back soon with another episode that's sure to capture your imagination. Until then.